everybody. Welcome to another episode of Aether Hour. I am your host, Conrad Franz, joined, of course, by Dmitry Kalyagin. It's the middle of March 2023, right in the midst of the expulsion or attempted expulsion of the monks led by Metropolitan Pavel from the Kiev-Pechersk Lavra in Ukraine. The war, of course, is raging on. It seems that the religious rhetoric on both, from Putin especially, is increasing as the Russian people view the enemy as more and more of a anti-Christian force. And so I think this is an appropriate time to talk about what we're going to be talking about in this episode. Don't you think, Dmitry?
Absolutely, Conrad. I think it's also important for, Orthodox Christians to not just return to, veneration of the saints and prayer during these great times, during this time of Great Lent, but also, in terms of contemplative prayer, especially for the Orthodox brothers and sisters in the Ukraine at the moment, especially those monks of the Kiev-Pechersk caves who are undergoing quite an eschatological sort of, perhaps even ancient type of, persecution and confessorship. So we of course support them and everything. But today, the third episode, it's definitely full of examples of people who also have been not really persecuted throughout their life, but definitely who have undergone some sort of tribulation from the forces of darkness in their own capacity, and perhaps do warrant not just veneration but canonization in the future.
No, it's really going to be a fantastic episode. This is some of our favorite things to talk about in general. Like, we would probably have this conversation even if it wasn't being recorded. So now we can record it and share it with you. So we're going to dive right into this by talking about the new martyrs of Optina, who were martyred in Easter of 1993 on the night of Pascha itself, actually, right after the Great Feast. And they resided in the Optina Monastery, which for those who are Orthodox may already be familiar with that famous northern hermitage in Russia. And they were martyred explicitly by a Satanist in a satanic fashion. And they themselves are now widely venerated across Russia. It was three monks, one of them being a hierom monk. And we're going to get into a little bit more about them, the background, and the murders.
Yeah, of course, and the Optina Monastery, of course, famous for its Optina elders who, came to much renown in the 1800s, responsible for you can call it the Silver Age of Russian Orthodoxy. Many of the famous philosophers, Russian literature writers, poets, and basically celebrities of all kinds, including nobility, would visit some of these great elders in the Optina Monastery throughout the 1800s, the 1860s, 70s, 80s, all the way into even the Soviet regime, ending around the 1930s and 40s, around the time of World War II. And that's when the Optina Monastery kind of went into a bit of a downturn with with monasticism kind of taking a more low-key position during the years of the Cold War. But this kind of reinvigoration and disappearance of these three wonderful new, technically already de facto saints in the Optina Monastery in the 1990s is something both miraculous and special, especially on a night such as Easter. Of course, this event, which took place in 1993, is both providential as well as, a great lesson for all Orthodox Christians to always be prepared for whatever time the Lord has prepared for their passing, even if it be on the greatest feast day of the year, when most of us are all celebrating with great festivity and joy. And even in a place such as the Optina Monastery, which many consider to be one of the safest places on earth in terms of Seraphim of Sarov and all the prophecies related to that, and how he mentioned the Antichrist not being able to, actually come into Optina, and the protection of the Theotokos over this monastery, and then for this event to actually take place there and be conducted by this evil man who, probably possessed by many demons and his own personal passions and sins, commits this, heinous crime and takes the lives of these three monks. I think all these things are, of course, greatly providential, but also a big blessing for the church in order to reestablish this local veneration of, few recent saints. Definitely a lot to consider here, and their lives are so well written as well, Conrad. I'm not sure, you've probably read a few interviews with them over the years, but even the monks during the 1990s and 80s, they were so and like their orthodoxy was just alight in such a way that even when they were being interviewed at the Optina Monastery, these three Giga Chad monks would basically answer open questions. Like there's written interviews recorded by the monks when people would ask, "Well, how's the Optina Monastery going?" in the late '80s, and of Saint Basil, the future, I guess we can call him Brother Basil at this point, one of the monks who was martyred at the monastery, he would reply, "Well, the monastery is doing great," and he would actually comment on the local Orthodox culture and some of the things he would do at the monastery. And these people were very passionate about their Christianity, and for their life to be taken in such a way, I think on the Easter night, it's definitely a great symbol for us Orthodox people to carry.
No, and we're going to, of course, talk more about the future saints, Basil, Therapont, and Trophim, their lives, the circumstance of their death. And it's great they've now joined the ranks of such fantastic saints as St. Paul and St. Ambrose of Optina, who, remember, for those who Dostoevsky fans who've read the Brothers Karamazov, Elder Zosima is based, I believe, on St. Ambrose of Optina, who Dostoevsky had some contact and experience with in his life. So this is a cultural wellspring of Christianity, I think, and of course a wellspring of miracles and saints. And of course, the other two we talked about future Saint Basil. He was the priest monk of the three. He before his martyrdom, he was actually on the way to confess, and he was known as a very powerful father confessor, as in a not a confessor before God. Well, he is now, but as a someone who receives and hears confessions in the priestly role. He was known to always remain fully silent, but he was considered a fantastic, prayerful neighbor in the sense that he, upon hearing all confessions, he was the type who, like spoken about in Dostoevsky and the Brothers Karamazov, he was a lover of mankind. He would take the sins of others onto himself and beg Christ for his forgiveness and beg the saints and the Theotokos to aid in prayer for that forgiveness. And there's all sorts of stories of nuns, of citizens talking about Father Basil and how they loved and would feel fantastic peace and a boost in, I guess, their spiritual life after regularly confessing with him, which I think is a very beautiful thing.